The only woman the Quran says, she will enter hell. The worst woman to ever exist, past and future. She was very rich and very strong, but these would not be enough. The incredible life story of this cursed woman, feared even by Shaitan. Jamil's struggle, disbeliefs, war against Islam. Watch now her untold story to understand today's Islam's enemy. You must first understand her. She was the first to use the tricks that today's enemies of Islam still use. She pushed her husband to reject faith and used her power to torture the Muslims. The story of a woman so evil that even Shaitan would be surprised. Once again, we bring you a shocking story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support us. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're ready, let's begin. Jamil belonged to Quraysh, one of the most powerful tribes of Mecca. Her father, Lahab bin Umayyah, was one of the respected leaders of Mecca. This meant that Jamil was born into a strong and well-known family. She was a woman from a high-status family, but this did not give her good character. Since childhood, she had been ambitious, proud, and full of anger. At a young age, she married Abu Lahab, the son of Abdul Muttalib. Abu Lahab was one of the richest and most powerful men in Mecca. His wealth made Jamil, who loved pride and luxury, very happy. Abu Lahab earned a great amount of money as a well-known trader of Quraysh, and Jamil used this wealth to become one of the most talked about women in Mecca. However, one of her most known qualities was her sharp tongue. She was not a woman who only depended on her husband's wealth. She influenced the women around her, spread rumors, and tried to ruin the name of anyone she hated. This made her even prouder. But the real truth was that she was a woman who feared losing her power and the respect of others. While most people in Mecca were busy with trade, some were more focused on protecting the honor of their tribes. Jamil was obsessed with keeping the status of her own tribe, and for her, the most important thing was the leadership of Quraysh, especially the family of Umayyah. But one day, shocking news spread in Mecca. Hadrat Muhammad, A.S., said that he was the messenger of Allah. For Jamil, this was like a disaster. She knew the family line of the Prophet very well. He was from the family of Hashim, which was also a strong part of Quraysh. But if Hadrat Muhammad was really a Nabi, wouldn't her power be in danger? For Jamil, the real issue was not truth but control. If Islam spread in Mecca, the rule of Quraysh would change, and her proud world would fall apart. That is why she became one of the first women to fight against Islam. Her husband, Abu Lahab, had already started to oppose the Prophet, but Jamil took this hatred even further. She did not only stand against Islam, she tried everything to destroy it, to bring down the honor of the Prophet, and to scare the believers. Her poisonous words could be heard in the narrow streets of Mecca, in the courtyards of houses and around the Kaaba. She was not just an enemy, she became a source of fitna. But her real battle was only starting. For Jamil, Islam was not just a belief, it was a serious danger to her life. There was one man in Mecca who stood against the system that had existed for years, Hazrat Muhammad, SAW. She was ready to do anything to stop this new dawn from spreading. At first, she did not take it seriously when she heard about Hazrat Muhammad's claim to Nubuwwah. She thought it would not last long. But as more and more people followed him, Jamil was filled with fear and anger. Together with her husband, Abu Lahab, she became one of the leaders who fought against this new deen. Jamil had a strong influence on the women of Mecca. A single word from her could spread across the city very quickly. She used this power to harm Islam by creating lies and spreading false stories. Muhammad is crazy, she would say. He is a magician, she would warn people. He is a liar who is breaking the order of Mecca, she would claim. Her lies were not just to trick people, her real goal was to damage the honor of the Prophet and push people away from him. She even used the lowest methods to achieve this. One day in the market of Mecca, she gathered people and shouted, "Muhammad is even harming his own family." But the truth was the complete opposite. The Prophet was the most honest and trustworthy man in Mecca. Yet Jamil tried to destroy his name with lies. Jamil's biggest enemy was Hazrat Khadija. She was one of the most respected women in Mecca and also the strongest supporter of the Prophet. Jamil felt great jealousy towards Hazrat Khadija. She made fun of her, encouraged the women of Mecca to turn against her, and tried to make her feel alone. However, no matter what she did, she could not succeed against the calm and dignified stance of Hazrat Khadija. Because of this, Jamil started showing her hatred for Islam through Hazrat Khadija. She threatened the women who visited her, saying, "If you keep meeting with her, we will exclude you from society." But Hazrat Khadija, radiyallahu anha, remained patient and strong against these lies. The man in her heart was much greater than Jamil's anger. Jamil did not only use words, she also tried every way to stop Islam in action. She made plans to scare the new Muslims and force them to leave Islam. She provoked the leaders of Quraysh to increase pressure on the Muslims. She placed stones and thorns on the paths where the Prophet walked to harm him. She encouraged people to remove Muslims from trade and social life. One day, while the Prophet was praying near the Kaaba, Abu Lahab and Jamil ordered their men to throw filth on him. They did not hesitate for even a moment to insult the most noble and honest man in Mecca. But no matter how much they tried, the number of Muslims kept growing. Every day, this drove Jamil mad. Lies and slander were no longer enough for her. She began to plan to kill the Prophet. For many years, Jamil was one of the biggest enemies of Islam. But her name was not only mentioned in the streets of Mecca, it was also written in the Quran as one of the cursed ones forever. Abu Lahab and Jamil became more violent against the Muslims as Islam spread, but no matter what they did, the truth of Allah would win. Surat al-Masad was a clear curse from Allah upon Abu Lahab and his wife. When the surah was revealed, the fate of Jamil and Abu Lahab was sealed. One day, the Prophet stood on Sufar hill and called out to the people of Quraysh. "O people of Quraysh, if I told you that there is an army behind this mountain ready to attack, would you believe me?" Everyone there answered yes, because you have never lied. Then the Prophet said, "Then I warn you about a great punishment." A silence followed. This was the beginning of the open call to Islam. But Abu Lahab, full of anger, jumped up and shouted, "Did you gather us just to say this? May you perish." Then he quickly left. Because of these words, Allah revealed Surat al-Masad, "May the hands of Abu Lahab be ruined, and ruined is he. His wealth will not benefit him, nor that which he gained. He will burn in a flaming fire, and his wife, the carrier of firewood, around her neck is a rope of fiber." This surah declared the terrible end of Abu Lahab and Jamil. The most striking part was the phrase, "the carrier of firewood." This described how she carried stones and thorns to harm the Prophet, but it also showed her evil and destructive nature. When Surat al-Masad was revealed, Jamil became furious. To her, this surah was like a death sentence. People in Mecca were now talking about her fate, even the leaders of Quraysh mocked her. One day, she picked up a large stone and planned to kill the Prophet. She went to Masjid al-Haram, thinking she saw him sitting there. Hazrat Abu Bakr was with him, but Jamil could not see the Prophet, even though he was right there. Instead, she turned to Hazrat Abu Bakr and shouted, "Where is your friend? I have come to harm him. He is the one who turned us against each other with his magic and lies." Abu Bakr radiallahu anh calmly looked at her. Allah had made the Prophet invisible to her eyes, even though he was sitting right in front of her. Jamil shouted in anger, threw the stone in her hand, and quickly walked away. She knew that Surat al-Masad had announced her end, but no matter how much she became angry, Allah's judgment would not change. The revelation of Surat al-Masad was a great disaster for Abu Lahab and Jamil. They had tried everything to stop the rise of Islam, but Allah had already written their painful end. Their hatred for the Prophet was not limited to lies and oppression. Abu Lahab was one of the leaders who supported the social and economic boycott against the Muslims. This harsh boycott lasted for 3 years, causing great suffering for the Muslims. Neither Abu Lahab nor Jamil could stop Islam from growing. However, their cruelty only led to their own destruction. Allah had already informed through Surat al-Masad that Abu Lahab would suffer eternal punishment in Jahannam. His punishment in this world came in the form of humiliation and disease. A deadly illness spread across Mecca, and one day Abu Lahab was struck by a terrible disease. It was so horrifying that no one dared to go near him. Even the people of Quraysh abandoned him. He died alone, suffering in pain. For years, Jamil had supported her husband and walked with him on the path of oppression. But when the time came, she even abandoned her own husband. After Abu Lahab died, his body was left in the open. No one wanted to bury him. In the end, a few men were paid to remove his body. They threw him into a pit and covered him with stones. Thus, all the wealth, status, and pride they had in this world disappeared. After Abu Lahab's death, Jamil was left alone. The strong, arrogant woman who once thought she had power over everything had suddenly become weak and helpless. People in Mecca whispered about her, saying that Surat al-Masad had come true and that Allah's curse had fallen upon her and her husband. But Jamil refused to accept her fate. She continued to walk around Mecca, speaking with hatred against the Muslims. However, as time passed, she too became weak and hopeless. According to historical reports, she also had a terrible death. Some narrations say that she was crushed under a large stone, while others say that she died strangled with a rope around her neck. The words in Surat al-Masad, "Around her neck is a rope of fiber," became a reality in her death. Jamil and Abu Lahab were among the greatest enemies of Islam, but in the end, they could not escape the punishment of Allah in this world. They thought they were happy with their wealth, positions, and arrogance, but their end was filled with humiliation, suffering, and pain. This event is not just a lesson for them but a warning for all disbelievers and oppressors until the day of judgment. O Allah, do not make us among those whose hearts are sealed like Abu Lahab and Jamil. Guide us to live with Aman, justice, and good character in the path of the Prophet. Purify our hearts from arrogance, jealousy, and hatred. Keep us firm on the straight path. Amen.